Hey guys, welcome to the very first video on my YouTube channel. My name is Jennifer, and on this channel I'll talk about scary, spooky, quirky, and sometimes tragic history. So if you're into that, stick around because I will be talking about some of the strangest and creepiest stories from all around the world. And today, we're gonna start off by talking about a place that I actually recently visited. So I'm like, it's fresh on my mind. Let me just start with this one. See, whenever I go to cities that are rich with history, I love doing ghost tours because not only do you hear about all the scary tales, you learn so much about the place's history. I can't remember the exact one that we went on, but if I find it, I'll go ahead and link it in the description below. I had to look up many videos on how to pronounce it and listen to all the locals, but I think it's Edinburgh. But for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna say Edinburgh. So if you've been there, you already know it feels like you're literally stepping into Hogwarts with the cobblestones and all of the historic, beautiful architecture. But one of the things that stood out to me the most were these alleyways called closes, and they're super narrow and they ran through the city kind of like its veins. And it was really cool because they were like secret shortcuts. You'd enter it on this side of the city and then pop out on the other side of the city. I don't know. I just thought it was very interesting. And each of them are filled with their own dark stories, which we'll talk more about later. But these are all the particular stories that I heard on the ghost tour that I just needed to do more research on and bring them to you. So grab your favorite drink or a snack and get cozy so we can talk about the Edinburgh you don't see in postcards. To get us started, we're going to have to rewind a few centuries because Edinburgh is one of Scotland's oldest cities. It has a history dating back to the 12th century when King David I elevated it to a royal burgh status. But over the years, the city has seen it all from wars to witch hunts to plagues. So we're gonna start with this. Back in the day, Edinburgh was nicknamed Old Reekie. And this wasn't because all of the picturesque, cute chimneys. No, it was because of the smell. So you gotta think about back then, they didn't have any plumbing systems really. They used chamber pots to do their business, and when they were done, they would just dump it right outside the window. And if you ever visit Edinburgh, you know that the city is on a hill. I swear everything was uphill when we were walking to places, but because it's on a hill, all of that waste would run downhill and collect at the bottom, which turned the city into a reeking mess that wasn't all that sanitary. The smells of trash and sewage would fill the air, making it very unpleasant for daily life. So it was a dark time. Everything was stinky, everything was unsanitary, and then the plague hits in 1645. It was a really dark time when people were dropping left and right from this terrible disease. In those narrow alleyways called closes that I was talking about earlier, there were families that lived inside there. If one was infected, a red X would be marked on their door, and there would be guards to keep these people confined in these foul-smelling, infected places, and families would have to helplessly wait and see who would survive and who wouldn't. So that was just the beginning of the darkness that surrounded Edinburgh. It's also interesting about like the no plumbing system. I mean, back then no one really had a plumbing system, but I think Scotland is known to have like the best tap water in the world, and I'm very particular about my water, and I tested it there. I mean, it tastes pretty good to me. I'm American, so I guess that doesn't really say much. There was no fluoride in the water. So when we were there, we quickly found out that the graveyards are one of the biggest attractions in Edinburgh, interestingly enough. You can visit the Harry Potter Tom Riddle graveyard, so it's very cool. And as we're walking through these gloomy graveyards, I couldn't help but notice that there were sometimes like huge metal corroded bars over the top of some of them. And then I actually found out that they were there to serve a purpose. One of Edinburgh's grimmest chapters takes us back to the world of body snatching. And it's exactly what it sounds like. In the 19th century, anatomy schools were desperate for cadavers to work on and study. With all the creative people in the world, a whole new business opportunity arose. People would go to these graveyards and wait it out until a family buried their loved one. Then they would go and dig that body out and take it to the medical school to get paid for it. And the medical school was just thankful they didn't even want to know or ask where the body came from. But some people thought that was a very tedious and long process, so they decided to make their own luck. Enter William Burke and William Hare, who were two Irish immigrants who thought that it would be much more lucrative if they could create the bodies instead. Their business model went a little something like this: invite people to their lodging home, get them raging drunk, and make sure that they never left. And their plan actually worked for some time because they were able to sell 15 bodies to a well-known surgeon, Robert Knox, without any trouble. So their business was going smoothly until they met a feisty woman named Margaret Docherty. They befriended her and everything was going according to plan. They invited her to stay at the lodging house and fed her many drinks and waited for her to pass out. Only problem is she didn't pass out. I mean, this woman was Irish, so instead of dozing off, she continued dancing, singing, and partying. This is when Burke and Hare was like, okay, that's enough. Let's put an end to this. And then neighbors eventually heard the commotion and knew something was off. Later, when guests found Docherty's body underneath their bed, the game was up. Burke and Hare obviously tried to cover it up, but witnesses and evidence started piling up fast. In the end, Hare snitched on Burke to save himself, and Burke was actually hanged before a huge crowd. Even more ironically, they publicly dissected him, and his skeleton is on display still in an Edinburgh museum. You could also still visit their lodging home, although now it's a strip club. Like Salem, Edinburgh is also widely known for its terrible witch trials. Back in the 16th and 17th century, people were just really terrified of witches. And this was particularly when King James VI took personal interest in squashing the witches because he wanted that fame and recognition. This sadly led to the brutal torture and execution of over 1,500 people, primarily women. And it didn't take much to be accused of witchcraft. Anything from having red hair or possessing a mole could be seen as a sign of a pact with the devil. Maybe that's where the saying gingers have no souls come from. Terrible saying. So once they were accused, they were subjected to terrible torture to get them to confess. One method they used was a thumb screw. And this was like a metal device that was like this small. It had a screw mechanism and it was meant to be placed around the thumb or other fingers. And as the screw was turned, it would crush the bones and joints, causing immense pain. This torture would start at the thumb and keep going until they got the person to confess. And faced with this bad pain, some people just found it easier to confess regardless of the truth. Another infamous torture method was called the witch's bridle, which was a spiked metal device forced into the mouth to prevent the accused from speaking. They wouldn't stop at torture. Sometimes they would put the accused through a series of tests. One gruesome test was called the swimming test, and this is where the accused would have rocks tied to their feet and they were pushed into the nearby river. If they floated, it was seen as evidence of witchcraft, but if they sank and drowned, they were deemed innocent, though obviously they were dead. This brutal period of fear and superstition led to the unjust execution of thousands, many of whom were completely innocent. There's a witch's well that's located at the end of the Edinburgh Castle, which commemorates those lives that were lost during these witch hunts. Now let's go even deeper, and I mean literally, because beneath the South Bridge, there's a network of underground vaults that were originally built in the late 1700s for business storage. Now, when the merchants moved out, the homeless moved in. And they were dark and cramped spaces, but for the desperate souls, this was a great place to live and hide out. You can actually go and see what these vaults look like for yourself, but we didn't do that ghost tour. That was a different one. But there's said to be a famous ghost down there named Mr. Boots, also known as the Watcher. And people report seeing him pacing the dark corridors, glaring at visitors, and even growling at them to get out. So some people think he was maybe a smuggler, or maybe he's protecting something that was left behind. So there you have it, just a few of the eerie tales of the hauntingly beautiful Edinburgh. It also has a really amazing food and beautiful sights. So if you ever visit, let me know if you guys ever visit these places. Well, thank you all so much for watching my very first video on YouTube. Let me know which story was your favorite, and if you like this kind of stuff, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye guys.